All right. I'm not sure if the others are going to be joining us, but I'm assuming they will be joining us soon. Oh, I see people have started joining in. That's good. Um, so I suppose we can start in the interest of time, seeing as we're supposed to. It's supposed to be one of those 3 hour long sessions. I mean, we might cut it short, seeing as it's a Sunday, and also we have an interaction on Wednesday. I don't think that we should be getting excited about being behind schedule here. Um, but one of the reasons why I've been pushing for us to have makeup sessions is so we don't lag behind. By the way, out of interest, just wanted to kindly ask if you could confirm if you can hear me just fine, and also if you can see my screen. I have just shared my screen. Okay.
Yes, sir, we can.
All right. Thank you very much for confirming. Really appreciate it. So I'll normally um, I'll normally share my I'll normally share my I mean I'll normally log into my mobile device for me to just confirm that people can hear me on the other side, just in case I lose connection. But the um, the problem comes in with the audio. There have been instances where you have these meetings or classes and you're talking to yourself for minutes, right, on end, which is why we are always asking if you can confirm. Yeah. So again, by the way, on Wednesday, I'd initially thought that we would, I would be able to make it in time for our class, but it turns out that the workshop I was attending, and I believe I may have said a thing or two about the workshop, but there's a system that's being implemented for the University of Zambia. It's a human resource management and payroll system, and I sit on the committee that is providing guidance, overseeing the development of the platform itself. And so we had a series of testing sessions, if you will. I mean, it's being pegged as one large system, but in actual fact, it's being pegged as one large system with modules, but in actual fact, the modules could more or less be viewed as independent systems. But in any case, apologies that we could not have class on Wednesday, and thank you for suggesting that we have this class today. Now, by way of announcements, we were meant to start, inviting people to come and give these invited talks, and our strategy this time around was probably going to be focused. It's still work in progress, but the thinking is maybe we can focus on a number of problems that we have been working on. So we invite a few people that are either involved with those problems or something, or have knowledge of the areas that we're working towards. But I think that from past experience, these invited talks will generally make a lot of sense after we've covered lecture series number 3, right, where we look at different types of data mining methodologies, although we zero down or we narrow down on the so-called CRISP DM model, right? And so we've decided we're only going to start inviting these people once we are done with that session, and I think that would be after next week. We should have started looking at the module itself, or we should have finalized it by the time we get to after next week. So yeah. And then just to mention that you'll probably see some names that you may not be familiar with. There are some fourth year students I'm working with. So these will be individuals or groups of individuals that are going to be working on group centric projects, because it turns out that their capstone projects are supposed to be worked on in groups. And the groups that are going to be joining us are groups that have expressed an interest to explore the field of data mining, or anything to do with or related to data mining. So things like exploration of techniques associated with artificial intelligence and machine learning, if you will. So yeah, do not feel alarmed or surprised if that's the case. And I think my audio is fine. All right. So today's session, as mentioned in our most recent interaction, is essentially going to be, and I should have mentioned here, it's going to be hands-on, but it's centered around introducing us to the technologies and tools we're going to be using, right, in the course. This is a practical-oriented course, and in as much as there are a series of tools available out there, there's certain technologies that we gravitate more towards. Something else I wanted to mention up front here is, you see, this area is constantly evolving. If anything, if you look at what has happened in the last, I'd say in the last 5 years or something, you notice that technologies that have anything to do with data mining have actually evolved at a very rapid pace, right? Point I'm trying to put across here is that in as much as we are going to be recommending certain types of tools, that's not to say that there are better alternatives out there. But the idea is the same. What we do is to present what we're going to cover in lecture series number 2 in a generic manner, such that you're able to replace the tools and technologies we're going to be recommending with whatever tools you wish, or whatever programming language. So just because we're going to be using Python doesn't necessarily mean that Python is the only, programming language that you can use when you're working on a data mining project, right? I mean, I've heard of people using strange things like MATLAB or something, I think, or even Java apparently, right? Or JavaScript. Idea is the same, really. So it's general introduction to Python for data mining and machine learning, or maybe we can call this Python for data mining and artificial intelligence or something. And as with most lecture series we're going to be having, it's split up into parts. If you want, you can think of these parts as being dedicated lecture sessions or topics, if you will. But we prefer to package these things in the same lecture series or module, if you will. So we're going to just start off by looking at so-called Jupyter Notebooks, and I do hope I've installed Jupyter Notebooks. I think I have. And then we will then have a discussion about a cloud-based service, right? That makes it a lot easier for you to create Jupyter Notebooks. All right, that's so-called Google Collaboratory or something. And then we will then, in part number 3, we'll start looking at just the basics associated with the Python programming language. So the usual, right? The syntax, things like, how you create variables, how you create functions, how you create classes. I don't think we're going to get to a stage where we look at how you create classes, even though Python is considered an object-oriented programming language, but you can actually get by without even creating classes or objects, right? If you've used tools like, I believe it's, I don't know if people in here have used tools like Django, for instance. What you realize is that, this web framework is implemented using Python programming language, but it's actually a classic example of how object-oriented aspects of Python are actually implemented, right? So if you've used Django, you probably know what I'm talking about here, but that's fine. And then in the last part, we're essentially going to look at some core Python libraries, right? Modules, libraries that we're going to make extensive use of. So these, and I'll talk more about some of these libraries, but these are libraries that you would use when you're trying to analyze data, right? Think of this analysis as being atypical to what you do when you are using some spreadsheet application like Google Sheets or perhaps Microsoft Excel, right? Or Open Document Spreadsheet. What you normally do is you open up the spreadsheet, right? And then you do a number of manipulations within the spreadsheet itself, right? So things similar to, I think people know exactly what I'm talking about, but I'm going to showcase this nonetheless here, right? CSV. What you would normally, and I can't find That's okay. Um, anyway, we'll talk about this when we get there. So there's a couple of things that you normally do in Excel, right? Especially when you're handling a lot of data. So things like you might want to summarize the information, right? Generate pivots. I don't know if people have used the pivot feature in Excel. You might want to draw graphs, for instance. Now, if you look at your typical data mining pipeline, relative to the phases we're going to discuss, what you'll notice is that the manipulation will not mostly be undertaken as part of phase number 2, where you're doing a bit of exploratory data analysis, and also as part of data preparation, right? But the idea behind using specific Python libraries for you to do that rather than using an external application is you're saving yourself time. That's one thing. The other reason for why you'd want to do that is you could easily implement your pipeline in such a way that it's easily reproducible. So a person whom you're going to share this pipeline with, hopefully using a Jupyter Notebook, will not struggle to replicate what you did, because everything is self-contained within a single Jupyter Notebook. And this will make sense, I think, when we get to the stage where we are discussing this really. But other examples of core Python library, the Python libraries that we're going to be using here, things like but the library I was talking about when I was mentioning Excel here would be Python Pandas, it's called. But other libraries that we will probably look at are things like scikit-learn, which we make extensive use of actually when we are looking at the modeling part of your data mining methodological approach, right? So when you're actually implementing these models, could be regression models or classifiers, or perhaps models that implement unsupervised learning, right? Anyway, there's more, like for instance, libraries that I use for plotting. Again, you see, the thing about plotting is you normally would do quite a bit of extensive plotting when you are doing your preliminary exploratory data analysis prior to data preparation, but also when you're evaluating your models, because it turns out that when you're evaluating your models, one of the things that you want to showcase to people are things like the results of the CGIR, the results of the models that were implemented, right? So it turns out that it's a lot easier for you to present that sort of information as, well, in the form of visualizations or something, right? It's a lot easier for people, for instance, if somebody sees a rock cave like this one, it's quite evident that it may not be evident for you, but it'd be quite intuitive for the person looking at this to say, well, the best performing model is the one in red, right? Which is an artificial neural network, essentially, right? Because it has the highest area under a curve here, right? This is a lot easier to understand, right? Especially if the figures you're looking at, if the difference between the figures or the numbers you're looking at is not that significant. So we tend to use, we make extensive use of matplotlib. It's a package, it's a Python library, if you can call it that. But something else I wanted to mention is that just because we are going to use this library doesn't necessarily mean that you should use that library. I have come across people that will instead, so in your Python pandas, you generate summaries of data, and the plotting is done using a tool that you're familiar with. And the average person, I'd like to think this is the case for you as well, the average person would be more familiar with things like Excel, right? Or in my case, especially when I'm collaborating with other people, not with Excel, but I make extensive use of Google Sheets, right? So this thing we're putting together, and I think I'm hoping we can present this as a case study as well. But this thing we're putting together, right? We did not generate these graphs that you're going to see in here using matplotlib, right? All of these things here were generated using Google Sheets. All of the graphs in here. I mean, they're not really complex graphs, just bar plots it's just bar plots actually. Am I surprised there's no line plot here? It's just bar plots, but it turns out that one of the reasons why people who sing about matplotlib is because it's so flexible and it has wide application. In fact, if you just take time and just look at the matplotlib website and just look at the examples, you'll be amazed as to what this thing can be used for, right? So there's different types of visualizations that you will find here in case you're interested. If you're too excited about this and would want to take a look at this before we have a discussion with matplotlib, there's the URL there, right? So one of the things that perhaps I quite like about matplotlib is that its ability to generate aesthetically pleasing plots, its flexibility in terms of the types of visualizations that can be created, right? Sophisticated visualizations. I mean, if you've used a tool like Excel, for instance, you notice that, or Google Sheets, I'll use Google Sheets as an example here. You notice that there's certain limitations in terms of what sort of graphs you can generate, right? So if you go to let me just open up this example spreadsheet here. If you come here and you try and see what sort of graphs you can generate, right? I'm just going to edit this chart here. You notice that to the right here, I don't know if you can see what's on the right here. These are the types of graphs here, right? There's so you can generate line charts. There's what else do we have here? There are column plots, bar plots, pie charts, all sorts of things here. But so it's not as, I've always thought it's not as flexible as tools like matplotlib, right? So anyways, we shall discuss it nonetheless. Again, the argument I would pose if someone was to ask me, why are you wasting time trying to fidget around with matplotlib when you can generate these plots using Excel? The answer I would give is, I have created a pipeline and I would want to ensure that the entire pipeline uses the same technology stack, right? So that it's a lot easier for me to share this thing with other people. Otherwise, the workaround would be that you generate the summaries of the information and share maybe the CSV files with whoever, and Excel files with whoever would be interested in replicating what you did, or you include instructions in the notebook. And this is where our discussion of so-called Jupyter Notebooks is going to be quite useful here. So there's that. Anyway, so essentially what we're going to do here, and we're going to get right straight on with part one here. I also want to encourage you to stop me if you have a question, or if you have an addition. Actually, I know that there's likely people in here that are conversant, already familiar with what we are discussing. So please feel free and interrupt us. So yeah, it's just a quick walkthrough of Jupyter Notebooks here. We'll look at the interface, text or content, different types of contents that you have in a notebook, how we incorporate live code, because that's a main type of content that you'll find in a notebook, right? Scripts or snippets of Python functions or code or something. And also how we integrate visualizations. This is in instances where we're using packages like matplotlib. Although matplotlib is not the only. This is the other thing. When if you haven't used Python, you discover that once you start digging in deep, there'll be people out to try and talk you into using tools like Seaborn. Do not use matplotlib. Use Seaborn instead, right? Seaborn is better. And people come up with really funny reasons, like the graphs are more aesthetically pleasing. They are more prettier, which is true, by the way. Most of the things I've done by way of graphing using Python, I use Seaborn, right? Especially complex things that perhaps may not be inbuilt in Matplotlib by default. Again, if you have time, I do encourage you to perhaps find time and comb through Seaborn at your own time, obviously, if you want to read ahead. I don't think we discussed Seaborn. Maybe it will pop up in some of the code snippets we're going to be sharing here. But if you learn how to use Matplotlib, you should be able to learn how to use Seaborn. Anyways, that's fine. Now, I don't know if it's the part where we do. Let me just quickly go ahead here and check if we. Okay, I thought. I thought there was a part where we. Just a minute. I thought there was a part where. Oh, we. Okay, we do this. I think during the installation. I guess. Do we? There's supposed to be. I don't know if it's going to be towards the end. It's supposed to be a part where we are installing some of these things here, but maybe we don't, which is quite sad. But I think part of the reason why I removed those things is because I don't think it's necessary for us to teach people how to install software. But anyways, so that's that. That's fine. There is a bit about installation. So the idea behind a notebook is simple, right? As the name suggests, it's like a normal book. If you did if you did your grade 12 in Zambia, I know we have a colleague who went to school in Zimbabwe. I would like to think they use a similar curriculum here. But at some point, you are expected to do labs, right? It could be physics, chemistry labs, biology labs or something. So you went in the lab, and the expectation is that you'd go in the lab with a notebook, right? I think they used to call it a lab. Is it I don't know if it was a lab, a logbook or lab notebook or something when I was in first year at UNZA. But you'd use that to document maybe results about an experiment that you're conducting. So the idea is the same with the Jupyter Notebook, right? It's meant to be this self-contained container structure or artifact that you can use to document what you're doing. In this case, for the purposes of what you're doing, we're documenting the activities associated with the data mining project that we're executing. And the best way of thinking about this is documenting everything you're doing as part of business understanding, as part of data preparation, as part of modeling, evaluation, right? Everything. Deployment, all of the phases of the typical data mining project. Right. And the thing about these notebooks is usually these would be, once you create a notebook, you'd actually view it using some web application. In fact, implementations of this manifest themselves as web applications. Not all of them, but most of them. It turns out that when you create a notebook, for instance, you can actually view it using Chrome plugins, for instance, right? Or in some instances, you can view this information using I think there are certain IDEs that will have plugins, right? So there are plugins these days that you can use. Like for instance, Visual Studio. I don't know if I have Visual Studio Code here installed, but Visual Studio Code has an extension for notebooks. So all you do is you just install the extension, and then you'll be able to open your notebook. I don't know about running the notebook here. You probably need your Python interpreter installed or something and configured appropriately within Visual Studio Code. But that's that. So details about Jupyter Notebooks are available on Jupyter.org. So if you go on Jupyter.org, you can already maybe start doing this so that you're able to follow along with what we're going to be discussing. If you go here, you will find everything and anything related to Jupyter Notebooks. For the purposes of what we're doing, what would be interesting is for you to get to this menu item that says install, right? So that you can already install it on your computer or something. Now, maybe I don't know about you, maybe some of you guys may not have installed this already, but because you need Python installed also, the way this is run locally. But the instructions nonetheless, you can use, I think, is it Anaconda or something? I don't know if it's still an option where you use Anaconda for you to do the installation. What I like doing myself is I like setting it up using pip install. So I generally use as pip install to install this as a Python module, and then I'm able to run Jupyter Notebooks locally. Anyways, as an application, okay. So that's that. So the idea is everything you're doing, whether you're writing Python code, if you have scripts that enable you to harvest information from somewhere, you'd construct a notebook that you will have all the steps you are taking to achieve your objectives. Right? So it's more or less like the same thing we do when we're writing code using a text editor or an IDE, if you will. The only difference is that in this case, the resulting file, the notebook itself, can be shared with another person, and if that other person has the tool required to play back a notebook or to run a notebook, they'll be able to access whatever it is you'd have done, making collaboration relatively easier here. So in terms of the anatomy of the notebook, because our interest is on the notebook, right? This Jupyter Notebook itself could be viewed as a web application, really, and it comprises of textual content. You can view this textual content really as descriptive information that helps explain what you're doing. So maybe at the very beginning of your notebook, you may want to have a couple of paragraphs or sentences explaining what that notebook is about, or explaining the problem. So there'll be textual content. Again, when you create cells that will have the source code, you might want to include descriptive information about what the source code does, right? Maybe details about where the data is being, the source of the data sources are located, and how the data is being extracted, justifications and all those things. So you have a combination of this web application. Will have a combination of textual content, of course the live code. This could be Python, predominantly it's Python, but it turns out that most of these notebooks you can create a kernel that will enable you run things like R, right? Because I believe R is one of those popular programming languages that is used for machine learning. I don't know if people have experience with R. I do myself, but my experience with R is just restricted to statistical analysis. This is what I use this thing for. I do not use it to create machine learning models. I don't know if I'm doing myself a disservice for not, exploring this further really. But I found that Python does everything for me really. So you can create a kernel really, and I don't know if I have. Maybe I can quickly check here to see if I have Jupyter installed. I'm just going to
start rolling out projects.
Oh yeah, I thought that was directed towards me. We'll ask our colleague to mute themselves perhaps.
Nice time of reflecting and refreshing. Okay.
Yeah, and I think I do have, there we go. I think I have this installed. Beautiful stuff. So, I mean, and I probably need to kind of like, what do you call this? I may need to probably update this or something. Don't know. Oh, also, maybe I should have shut it down. I think what I should have done here is just create a code directory and then run it from here. That would be a lot easier. So the idea is, the point I'm trying to put across is that we can actually create a different sort of kernel, right? We also are going to be using Python, the Python kernel, but there are other kernels that you can create. And I think for Jupyter Lab, I may be mistaken, but there should be a plugin that you can install, right? To enable you work with R, for instance. I believe. I don't know. Maybe not. I think so. But it's being updated here. So if I were to install the plugin here, I'll then be able to create. This is weird here. R. I don't know why I can't see. Okay. R. That's fine. But there should be a way of adding a new Python kernel, in essence. We can look at that at a later stage or something. But in any case, so it's a combination of live code, equations in some instances, and more importantly for us, visualizations, especially sections of your notebook that are dedicated to the whole process of exploratory data analysis and perhaps evaluation of results. All right, evaluation of your models, if you will. Okay. And I think if you look up, say Jupyter kernels, I think there should be details about programming languages that are supported. I've not really explored these other languages, if you will, but if you look at this here, it doesn't seem like it has list of available kernels, maybe. Yeah, this is very strange. This is Jupyter kernels. This is very. I had no idea. I don't know what L Fortran is here, but there we go, right? So these are some of the things that you can actually do in your Jupyter notebook, right? So just because we're going to be predominantly making use of Python, and just because the Python kernel is the default kernel, doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot, use your notebook. You can't use these other different programming languages using your notebook. It's quite a bit of support there. Again, for those interested, I'm going to share the resource with the kernels. Again, I mentioned that instructions are available on jupyter.org. Just go to jupyter.org/install. I will encourage you to maybe try out some of these things we're going to be doing today, right? So that you're familiar with what we're going to be doing here, and more on that just now. Maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves, but I don't know if we should be discussing. Anyway, maybe when we can do some simple exercises when we get after our discussion of Google Collaborator or something, because the things that you get to do with Jupyter Lab, right, or Jupyter Notebook, can be accomplished with Google Collaboratory, right? So if I if I create a new notebook like this, right, and interactive Python notebook, in this case .ipynb here, interactive Python notebook, what you notice, and perhaps I could I should rename this, but what you will notice is that the things that you can do here in this interface are the same exact things can be accomplished when you're using Google Collaboratory. And I always tell people, it depends, but I always tell people that try as much as possible to do whatever it is you're doing, at least when you're learning in Google Colab. The only drawback here with Google Colab is because it's a cloud-based service. The moment you find yourself in an environment where you do not have internet access, you're doomed, right? It's like, let us not use Microsoft Word now because there's Google Docs. Well, what do we do when we don't have access to the internet? I know what you're saying here, no, but you can have an offline copy of Google Docs. Fair enough, but which is true though. But yeah, so if you want to install this, just go to jupyter.org and then click install here. right? In terms of the user interface, once you install it and you run, by the way, you have the option to, I believe, install Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebooks. The difference is in the features that you have access to, right? I would recommend that you install Jupyter Lab. So when you install Jupyter Lab and you run it, I'm going to shut down this. I'm going to shut down the server and start it again. So once you install it, what I did myself is I installed it using pip install, right? So I'll just do a pip install and then I'll say Jupyter. I think it's Jupyter or something. Because I've already installed this, I mean, I can't install it anymore. So once you install this, you run it. I'm using Ubuntu here, but you run it by just running Jupyter Space Lab here, right? And then a web page is going to be automatically, at least the local server will start running, and a tab will be opened in your browser, your default browser. In this case, it's Chrome in my case, right? And I think by default, this thing runs on port 8888 for obvious reasons, just in case you have something else running on these other common ports here, right? So localhost port 8888 /lab. You only be able to access this service once you've started the server, right? And so what I was doing on the terminal when I said Jupyter Space Lab is I was starting the server, and what Jupyter Lab does, at least my local installation does, is it automatically also spawns an instance, right? It opens a new page or something, an instance of the kernel. If you already have notebooks available, you would then navigate to the location of your notebook, and more on that later on. Or maybe I can showcase this just now. But in this particular case, right, I want to create a new notebook. I'll just create on this Python 3 kernel, and then a new notebook called entitled 1 is going to be opened, right? Now, the very first thing you want to do, obviously, is you want to rename this notebook, right? In my case, I'm going to rename this to maybe, I'll just say code UNZA 24, CSC 5741, and then I'll say, I'll just call this lecture 2 or something. Jupyter Notebooks or whatever. That's okay, right? And then I have access to this notebook, right? Now, the thing about the notebook is that, like I said, is a combination of descriptive textual content, live code, equations, and visualizations. What you do when you're using a notebook is you specify text and live code in cells, right? So cells would be something similar to this, right? I think that's created by default. So an example of what I might want to write here is, I would say, introduction to Jupyter Notebooks or something. This is text, right? And obviously I have to change this to Markdown. So this is text. The moment I run, it's going to be rendered. And we'll talk more about Markdown. It's a simple markup language, but I know the people that have done a bit of programming are familiar with Markdown because Markdown is all over, right? Markdown is on GitHub, for instance. Everything we are seeing on Bitbucket, everything we are seeing here is in Markdown, is it? I don't know if people know about this. It's everywhere. Markdown is even on, I like using this as an example. Markdown is even on Wikipedia, right? If you edit content on Wikipedia, you know that Markdown is what is used for you to edit. It's a markup language used for you to edit content on Wikipedia, if you will. I suppose so. Ooh. All right. Yeah, so Markdown is everywhere. So I just showed an example of some text that I just created. Now, the thing about text, we'll talk a bit more about Markdown here, is because this is descriptive information, I'm choosing to format it in a certain way. In this case, I'm saying I want this to be like a title or something, right? And then maybe the introductory text, again, I'll change this instead of code. I'll say it's Markdown. I'll just say this, what is this called? this notebook is a brief introduction to Jupyter Notebooks or something, right? And the beauty about this, by the way, is that you actually get to use this in more or less the same way you'd write content in a textbook or maybe in HTML or something. We shall cover the following topics. Jupyter Notebooks introduction, Jupyter Notebooks, Markdown, Google Colab. Now, so the idea is I'm formatting the descriptive text in such a way that somebody is able to follow through with the notebook. And some notebooks can be quite lengthy, right? Because imagine if your entire notebook has the entire data mining pipeline. You have a description of what you're doing in that notebook. You have a section of the notebook that will have live code and visualizations about business understanding, live code and visualizations about how you are collecting the data, how you are pre-processing the data, how you are modeling, and how you're deploying as well. But anyway, so live textual content here. The other thing that you'll notice from this interface, right, we're looking at the UI here, is that so the cells are used to specify text and code and so live code and textual content, but they're also important menu bars and toolbars that you can see here. The most important ones I want to argue here, probably if you look at the file menu items here, will probably be things like the file menu item, right? If you want to open stuff, and really most of these things are quite self-explanatory. I don't think we need to waste a lot of time discussing this. I think we can probably figure these things out as we go along, but maybe just quickly go through this. You have the content pane where you're specifying the live code and where you see the output, right? So you will notice that when I write something in the cell and I run it, and by the way, when I contextualize the cell here, I can run it by using these toolbars, right? There's this play button here, which is used to run a cell. But what I like to do myself is I use a shortcut, Control Enter, right, for me to run it quickly. You will not be able to see the output until you run the cell. The cell ideally is supposed to comprise of something that you will need to execute. Upon execution, you must see some meaningful output. The output is still going to be in the same cell if it's textual content, so Markdown. The output would be on the following cell if it's live code. Like for instance, I'll say print, this is code here, print 2024 plus 2, right? I will see the result right below the cell that has the code or something, but talk more about this just now. Okay? I rarely use these other menu items. Maybe sometimes if I want to, let's say, if I want to create a new cell, I'll probably use this add new cell toolbar here, right? So if let's say I've already added multiple cells, like here I have print hello Python or something, and I run this and I realize, oh, I needed to create a cell right after this cell 2 here. What I'll do is I'll just use this this button here, the insert cell button, and then I'll be able to insert a cell right below here. But of course, I mean, you can install a cell right at the bottom, and then you can use the move button, the up arrow, button here to move the cell right on top or below if you want to. That's fine. That's that. What you'll notice as well is, like most software applications, colleagues, what you will notice is that this is weird. I don't know why this thing is not going in full screen mode here, but that's fine. What you will notice is that the things that you can do using these menu items, right, can be accomplished either using shortcut keys, like I gave an example of running a cell, Control Enter, or you can use the toolbar, right? Alternatively, you can use this menu item. So I'll come here and I want to print, instead of 2024 plus 2, I'll say plus 5, and then I can use the menu item run and then say run the selected cell. I'll get the same output there. You soon see that sometimes once you have a very complex notebook and you make a change somewhere, a change that's going to affect subsequent cells, you'd want to rerun the entire notebook, right? So there's options for you to run all cells, right? Or run all markdown cells. Quite useful here when you get towards the end here, right? Or if you've covered a number or a series of steps. Anyways, so we're saying here that the output for anything other than running a cell that comprises of markdown will have the output appearing right below the cell, the input cell. This would be the input cell. The output for anything other than markdown would be right below here. I wanted to see if I could use another example, but yeah, the output appears right below here. Another example of markdown here. I don't know if you noticed, don't have to give another example. I'll open up this cell, activate this cell. You notice that the text or content in this cell, once executed, if I click the run this cell button, no output appears below the cell. The output appears within that same cell that has the markdown, right? This is what I was trying to say here. To say the output only appears below the cell, the input cell, for anything other than markdown code. Okay, so the idea of this descriptive information, and just to show you a bit of maybe an example, right? In case you're wondering, well, but what's the point of this textual content, right? I'm just going to open up a notebook. And I believe we were looking at the notebook with somebody recently here. So if you look at the thing I've just opened now, right? What you will, I don't know if you can see it, it's still loading here, but what you'll notice is there's we have a bit of descriptive information about what this notebook is all about, right? You know, and then afterwards we have cells that enable us install packages, important packages. We have utility functions and all that, right? Point I'm trying to put across here is that there may be instances where you'd be required to provide detailed descriptive information about what is happening, which happens to be the motivating factor for why we're having a discussion about how exactly we present this textual content. Primarily, Markdown is used to specify this content. Markdown is nothing more than a markup language, just like XML, just like HTML, right? Just the only difference is the syntax. The idea is the same, right? You have content, and what you're doing is you're using the markup language to specify how the content is going to be presented. You know, and the point we're trying to stress here to say primarily is important. Doesn't necessarily mean that you exclusively use Markdown to render this content. It turns out that I forget the cell magic that is supposed to be used, but you can actually use, you can also make use of HTML, right? You can embed HTML code in here as well. Let me see if I still remember. Is it HTML? Let me see here. href. I don't know if that's a correct cell magic here. http://zm. Just say the University of Zambia. Let's see if I run this. I don't know if it's just one. Actually, maybe I see this thing runs by default, right? Which is a bit weird. I was actually under the impression that you need to specify the. Maybe this is how this thing works by default. Let me just try in here. I'm just going to create a cell in Google Colab and run this. Okay, so by default, don't need the cell magic here. What you'll notice is what I've done is I've I'm not using Markdown here because in Markdown this is not how you specify. This is not how you specify a hyperlink, is it? This is HTML code. So you can actually embed HTML code within your Markdown, right? Because vast majority of people are comfortable with HTML like that. You can do that, and so it goes without saying then that the stuff we have here, colleagues, right? Oh wow, I'm just going to copy this, and the stuff that we have here, I don't know why this thing is not. Why I'm unable to. This is the thing about some of these notebooks. You can't copy them. So what we're saying here is that we can accomplish the same thing. Let's zoom in here so that people see. We can actually accomplish the same thing here. Instead of using Markdown to do this, we could just have as well have said, okay, this is. We could have done what we normally do in HTML. I don't know if people remember in HTML, we'd say, oh, we want to create an unordered list, right? And this unordered list here has list items, right? One of the list items is Jupyter Notebooks, right? And then there's Markdown, right? And then there's I suppose there's Google Colab or something like that. I don't know. So what we're saying here is that we would be able to accomplish the same thing by running this, right? And I think this is the part where we needed. I wonder if this is the part where we need HTML somewhere. Let me just check. Sorry, if you notice, again, my fault here. If you notice, somewhere on top here, when you're creating a cell, you must specify what type of cell it is. In this case, this is Markdown. So if I run this, it's going to be rendered now. The default cell type is a code cell, it turns out. Yeah, if that makes sense, right? So again, Markdown, right? So what you're doing is you're using Markdown to specify the structure of the content. The content are the descriptive text, and Markdown is just used to style it. Now, at your own time, I do encourage you to look at some crash course introduction to Markdown. The original tutorial, I think, should be. I think it should be there at the end or something. I always encourage people to go to. I don't use Markdown guide here, but I think it's Markdown guide. It is. So there's an outline of like basic syntax that is used. But when you look at the things, the bare minimum that you need for you to be able to build or to be able to provide descriptive text or content in your notebook, really, to be honest, we don't really have to worry so much about some of these other things. So some common things that you need to do is because this notebook will have different aspects of your data mining pipeline, you will need to probably structure it in such a way that the types of section headings are consistent. So the section heading for business understanding should be at the same level as the one for data preparation and modeling as well. This is where headings become important. And the headings are used in the same way that we use headings in HTML and indeed when we're using word processors. So if you remember your HTML, you have heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, right? And you specify these things. I don't know how much of this people remember here, but when you create your HTML code or something, right? You have something like this. I'm just going to say CSC 741.html. You have something like this, and then you'd have your head tag, right? and then you have your body tag or something, right? And then within your body tag is where you would have things like I know what people think, yeah, but where's the title icon? Oh, there we go, right? So the thing is, within the body tag is where you find things like heading 1, right? So this would be like if you go to a website like Unza, maybe it would be the not the title of the page, but it would be like a title of one of the sections there, right? I don't know what we have on the Unza website, but if you go on some blog, the H1 tag would be something like the title of the blog post or something. So in this case, for the Unza, something like this would be an H1 tag, right? But the point I'm trying to drive at is that within a typical HTML page, you may also want to specify level 2 headings and level 3 headings or level 4 headings, depending on whatever it is you're creating. The same thing we find in a word processor, right? When you're creating a Microsoft Word document, right? One of the things you do is you structure it in a certain way. I don't know if people do this, but I know I do this myself. You structure it in a certain way, right? So say CSC 5741, right? 5741, data mining and warehousing or something. And normally the way you do this is you just write your content like this and then you structure it afterwards. Or you can define your style, right? But most word processors will have a default style. So in this particular case, I want this to be a title and I'll style this as a title, right? And then I want to say introduction to, or say Jupyter Notebooks, Google Colab, Python for data mining. And I'll have Python libraries or something. Now, the thing here is that because all of these 4 things are at the same level, I'll use my word processor to specify that this is a heading 1, right? Under this, maybe I'll have text, live code, and graphs or something. These would be like level 2 headings. But you get the point. Title, level 1, level 2, right? And you style it like that. Now, what we're saying is, for you to accomplish the same thing in when you're using Markdown, you use this syntax. All right. So a hash symbol, a pound symbol, 1 pound symbol, is effectively creates a level 1 heading. 2 pound symbols following each other will create a level 2, and so forth. Now, by the way, I don't know if you figured this out, but Markdown has become quite common. It's I don't know how many people. I think all of us know that Markdown is what we tend to use when we want to format text in a certain way in WhatsApp, right? So it's there in WhatsApp as well. Although I'm not certain if I'm not exactly sure if all the entire syntax of Markdown is actually supported there. What I do know is things like when you're making text board, for instance, or when you're creating, I'll use the course rep here as an example here. But when you're creating, I'll just say Markdown example, right? I don't think everything is supported. Markdown example. I don't think everything is supported. The headings are not supported, but what is supported, things like if you want to make text bold, right? This is bold. You just bold, right? You use asterisks or something like that. Or this is in italics. This is all Markdown. Nobody cares really, I guess. Nobody cares that it's Markdown as long as the people behind WhatsApp will tell you, for you to create bold text, just use asterisk. For you to create, and if you look at WhatsApp formatting, this syntax that you will find here is Markdown. I don't know if they specify that this is Markdown really, but this is Markdown. Well, some of the things anyway, not all of them. Bullets as well and numbering, but that's okay. Anyways, so that's that. So this is the syntax. Something else I wanted to mention is that the syntax for Markdown, right? There's two in terms of creating sections. I don't know if this is also available in here, but this is level one, right? And this has to be changed to Markdown. You notice that it's going to be large like that, but I don't know if this will work here, but this is supposed to be level 1 as well, I think. Or maybe this syntax doesn't work. I don't know if it's official syntax here, but sorry. So this is interesting. I think I was trying to remember what Wikipedia does, right? I think in Wikipedia, I could be wrong here, but let me see if I was dreaming, but I don't think I'm wrong. If you look at if you edit a typical page on Wikipedia, what you notice is that some of these headings here, where is that? If we can find the heading we're looking for. If you notice here, history of Zambia, right? This is what I was talking about here. It's an alternative syntax, but it appears it may not be implemented elsewhere. If you look at Wikipedia, history of Zambia is represented like this, right? But it appears this is not working here, which is rather odd. Indeed, it is rather odd. That's okay. No one is complaining here. I'm actually surprised here that this thing is not working. I thought it would be implemented, but that's okay. Anyways, we'll go with the syntax that actually works here, right? So your level 1 headings, right? £1 symbol, level 2 headings, £2 symbol, and so forth. I'm not sure how far deep this goes here, but usually you only go up to level 3 in most instances, right? And then in some instances, you will find yourself wanting to maybe enumerate things or to order things in a certain way, right? Bullets or unordered lists are created using an asterisk, right? Followed by the text. So by default, the moment you type an asterisk and you want to make sure this is Markdown and specify text, it's going to be rendered for you as a bullet, right? Bullet 2 or something. This is for unordered lists. And then if you want to render ordered lists, you use normal enumeration, right? So instead of bullet 1, bullet 2, you'd come here and you'd say 1, 2 or something, 3, right? Again, you want to make sure that this is changed to Markdown. If you run this, it's going to be ordered like this. I'm not sure if this has to be, I think you can use the same symbol here. As long as you put a number and a dot, it automatically knows, right? I don't know if you can see this. This can be 5, 3, nobody does this though, and 2 here. It will, well, I guess this has happened here, but it will order these things for you, right? If you put a number followed by a dot, it knows that this is supposed to be an ordered list, right? And then comes, so that's, I mean, I don't think there's anything else that we need to be discussing here by way of common formatting here, but just to mention that there are other additional things that you may want to do, which is why I shared the link. Like for instance, you may want to emphasize certain text, right? I want this to be in bold. Oh, oops, it appears this is italic. This is supposed to be bold here. why isn't this appearing? It's supposed to be bold, I think. I want this to be bold or something. We emphasize in text. We can look up the syntax here just to be certain. I'm just going to put it here. Okay, so it's if you want the text to be in bold, it appears as 2 asterisks. I'm confusing the syntax with what takes place in WhatsApp here, right? Which is proving to be confusing. Apologize for that. I'm just going to open this up in here. So if I want this second enumeration to be emphasized, right, to stand out, I'll make it bold or something, or I want it to be in italics. So there are other formatting things that you may want for whatever reason, right? Maybe in some instances you want to include a hyperlink within the textual description, and I think I have examples in here, right? If you notice, this text, a chunk of text has a hyperlink that takes somebody to perhaps a different section or an external resource, web resource somewhere out there, right? Maybe reference material that is being cited in the notebook itself. Usually it comes in handy like that. Again, if you look at the resource I shared with you, there's other interesting things that you can take advantage of to format your text, like well, for paragraphs it's obvious, you just leave a space, right? What else is, we're emphasizing text bold and italics. For italics is 2 underbars, right, following each other, not a single underbar like in WhatsApp, for instance. In some instances, maybe you may want to use quotations, right, so that you provide text within the markdown itself, right? So something like this. Let's see if there's default code blocks. Yeah. But again, I mean, at your own time, you probably may want to look at this in great detail and try and see what things you think would be of benefit to you. So the example I was giving is a common use case is a part where you don't want to provide a cell with a code, but right within your notebook you want to explain to somebody, to say, as part of this text, right, the code below is an example of a Python inline comment. So you come here and you'd say okay, I'd say print hello, and then I'll say this will print the message hello, not hell. So the idea behind this is that okay, what is this? I'm just gonna do that. A new line of code. The idea behind this is that you're including source code within the markdown itself, rather than printing out the same thing. It will work if you print it out here, but the only difference is that this is going to be interpreted as being Python code, right? So the corresponding output will appear right below the cell itself, hello, which works just as well. But again, I mean, if you look at textual content, the only other things that perhaps you will find yourself using is how to embed, images, for instance. That is to say, if the images that you're embedding are not being generated by your code, right? So if you have Python code that makes use of matplotlib or perhaps Seaborn to generate graphs, no need to worry about that. But if you are wanting to include an actual JPEG file or a PNG file, for instance, there's markdown code that you can use for that. I think that's just about it in terms of popular things that you will find yourself using, really, because for the most part, it turns out that the thing that you'll be using the most, the things that you're going to find a lot in a typical Jupyter notebook is the actual code, right? And as mentioned, in our case, we're going to be using the default, Python kernel here, so we expect to make use of a lot of Python, a lot of Python code, but also in some instances, some rare instances where maybe you're using a Linux-like operating system, you may also want to run shell commands. You can run them as cell magics, and we'll discuss this just now. Right? So this is some of the common things that you'd be running, assuming you're using the Python kernel, but if you're using the R kernel, obviously the story changes here. By the way, I hope all of this is making sense to us. Or have we covered this before? I wonder. I just find that people have already covered this here, right? Is this making sense to us?
Yes, it is, though.
Yeah. I mean, maybe maybe it's too soon. We'll start the Colab. We'll ask you to, start playing along here so that you familiarize yourselves with how to do this, right? Anyways, so besides the normal Python code, right? Ask that we can maybe mute ourselves. Can I ask David to mute? What can I mute, David? This is weird here. Thank you very much. All right. So there's Python code, and we'll look at exactly what we expect to find there. But it could be import statements, right? If you're importing packages, or if you're installing packages. We also have shell commands. Actually, shell commands would be the ones you'd be using when you're let's say installing new packages, right? So you'd have your pip install commands right within a cell, and that would have to be specified as obviously as a shell command in this particular case. But if you're creating functions, for instance, if you are creating, so for instance, if let's say you wanted to create, this is a simple function here. If I wanted to create a function, right, called add, for instance, right, simple function here, number 1 and number 2 or something. The idea is I just print, I guess, print bar 1 plus bar 2 or something like that. Sorry, just excuse me. I think somebody's trying to call me. Just a minute. All right, sorry about that. I had to pick up that phone call. Right, so I was just giving an example to say, example of Python code that you may want to call, right? Want to define. You're defining a function, a new Python function, and obviously this has to be specified as a code cell, right? There's an error here. This has to be defined as a code cell, right? And then maybe at the later point here in the second cell, I'd say I want to add, 2024 and 5 or something, so it prints out the result. I've specified 2 new code cells, right, that I'm using to write Python code. And of course, if you look at a realistic example like this, what you notice is that this cell can be complex. It can be as long as the context requires, depending on the complexity of what you're trying to implement. It could be that you're wanting to implement a class file, for instance. I don't have an example where we have something complex being done here. These are all very short code snippets here. Maybe at the very most we have perhaps 10 lines of code or something. But the idea is the same. When you're writing Python code, you create a code cell. When you're creating Markdown, you create a Markdown cell. Okay. And then there's instances where you may want to run other things, right? Maybe things that you cannot accomplish using Python, for instance. What you'll be doing in that case is you can take advantage of perhaps shell commands, right? I use Linux quite often myself, so some of the things that I would be doing in a notebook would actually involve me using shell commands. And what we're saying here is that for you to run a shell command, you think of a shell command as something that you'd actually perform as when you're coming up with a bash script or something. So if, let's say, I wanted to check the list of files in the directory where this notebook is located, what we're saying is that you just prefix the shell commands with an exclamation mark, right? So present working directory, right? It's going to tell me that this notebook is in this directory. Can you list everything in the directory? I see that there are 2 files, right? There's 2 files in there. Can you list them in such a way that they are ordered, right? Right, like this. So I see that I even have access to things like the file sizes for these 2 files here and the ownerships of the files, right? The point I'm trying to put across here is that the same commands we run, present working directory, or list everything in here, or check the size of this entire directory, for instance, or run the file command or something. All of these things can actually be accomplished within a Jupyter Notebook. But for you to run a bash command, if you will, use exclamation mark, is what we're saying. Now, the interesting thing is that there are other so-called cell magics. The idea behind cell magics is you want to be able to do other things that you wouldn't otherwise accomplish by just using a code cell or a markdown cell by default, right? It's like think of these cell magics as being extensions. So if you run the list, is it list magics? Not magics, magic. You will have access to all the different cell magics, right? That this is weird. This thing doesn't. It's rendering these things in a completely different way. Let me just see if I can run this in. And I'm going to open a new notebook in Google Colab so that we can see these things. But what's being listed here, the things that you can do within a code cell, right? See here if we can. Maybe it's going to be a lot easier if they're listed. Maybe this is going to render them in a better way than Jupyter Lab. I don't know. Let's just try and see. There we go. This is much better. So what this is doing, I think for some weird reason, my Jupyter Lab is probably configured in such a way that these things they're actually being properly rendered on my behalf. But what I wanted to see are the actual how I actually get to use this cell magic. So you'll notice here that I can run. Oh, I've never done this before, but you see that I can run latte code. This is interesting. I've never So in LaTeX, I don't know if this, let's see if this will run here. In LaTeX, I know for a fact that, we know that in LaTeX, you can specify, how do we specify, what do you call this? How do we specify a list? It's like this, is it? Itemized. And then we say end. Itemize or something. I don't know if I remember. Well, I don't know if I remember this, but item, LaTeX. I hope this will work. I don't know if this is how I don't know if it's not running. No, well, no, it's not running. It's a bit weird here. But maybe it's because this thing is specified as, what is this? Is this, no, but it is specified as code. I don't understand why it's not working. It's quite strange. Okay. Very strange. Anyways, I guess I can look at this later on. I'm just curious. I've never used the LaTeX Cell Magic myself, but certainly this is interesting. This is really interesting. I've never. This is the first time I'm actually trying out. I'm now curious, right? I'm curious as to why this is not working. Has anyone used the LaTeX Cell Magic? Nobody? I hope this thing is not expecting me to write entire complete thing here, but that's okay though. It's okay. But what you want to do is, I guess at your own time, you want to look at some of these cell magics. We can try HTML and see if it's going to work. Although I don't know if this will actually be useful here, but because we had discovered that this thing here was rendered by default in Markdown, right? But I'm just trying to see if this thing is going to. So the HTML, if you notice, HTML Cell Magic is working, right? Multi-line. I've just created. This is a code cell, but within this code cell, I'm telling. And let me just check if this will work in, because I'm in Colab right now. Let me just check if it will work in my Jupyter Lab installation here. It's working as well. So I'm really not. I'm not sure why the LaTeX one is not working. When it's actually supposed to be. This is weird. When it's supposed to be working, maybe it will work here. Let me see here. We'll say begin, itemize, and then end, itemize, item, bullet 1, item, bullet 2 or something. Hope this will work. It's still not working. I don't know why this is not working. This is a bit strange here. But okay. That is okay, that is okay, that is okay. Maybe what if we check the and I think I've lost my connection here. Sorry everybody, and yes, I did realize that I lost my connection. I'm not sure what happened there, but I'll just share this again. We're wasting time here looking at cell magics here. I'm sure we can figure this out. And really, I think for most of you, you probably not use any of these things. But I was just trying to see if we can run if we can run some of these things, right? Subsection heading 2 or something. Not working. Anyway, I don't know, maybe something else that ought to be done for want to activate this particular cell magic here, LaTeX. But you'll notice that if you are a Perl programmer, you can actually run Perl code, I believe. Or maybe I think what this means is maybe it could be that you'd be able to run a LaTeX file or something, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe not. We can look at it later on. But some interesting things that you will probably find useful is time it, for instance. I know this should work. At some point you will find yourself wanting to check, ladies and gentlemen, how much time has elapsed. How much time has elapsed between you executing a particular cell. Let me see here. Print. Is this how you use it even? Hello world or something. Again, I don't know how time it works, but in some instances you want to take note of how long a particular cell is taking to run or something. I don't know. I don't know what we're doing here. I don't know what would possibly prompt you to do something of that sort, right? So I'm just trying to single out cell magics that I feel you may find useful, if you will. Time it. Yeah, if you're a Ruby programmer, I'm guessing you'd find this useful. If you're a JavaScript programmer, you'd probably find the JS cell magic useful. I think it could be that I'm just misrepresenting how these not the inline cell magics, but these other cell magics are actually used. You may want to look into this at your own time. Really, it's not like we're going to make extensive use of these things. So that's that about how you specify code. Again, a lot of this will make sense once we start looking at the Python programming aspect of all of this. And then there's a part to do with visualizations. So you will notice that a lot of this will make sense once we start looking at libraries like matplotlib, for instance. So I'm just showcasing a simple pie chart in I think this is matplot. It should be matplotlib as well. I think I could be wrong, but the idea is again, because this would be in Python. In this case, we're assuming it's in Python. What you'd be doing is once you import once you import a, and I don't know if I have matplotlib installed here, but I guess I can check. Yeah, I don't know. I hope, oh, it appears I do. So the idea is you can actually pot dot say, okay, maybe I don't really need to do this, but I can just say well, we can use gender here, right? Dot pi, and then we'll say 60 if this has 40%, and I think this should bring up something useful. Or I can use it right here. Actually, it should be better from here. I'm just going to say import matplotlib pyplot, I believe, as pot. Thank you very much. And then it says say pot dot pi. This is 60%. This is 40%, and this would be females versus males or something like this, right? Right. So you'd have. I don't know why this thing is not popping up here. I don't know if this will work. Not that it matters anyways. Something like this, right? So the idea is for instances where you want to visualize something, maybe you want to plot summaries of some pivot table from the data that you're analyzing in previous cells. You can visualize them right within your notebook. And this makes sense, right? Because remember, that part of the reason why you're doing this is at a later stage, you may want to play back this notebook. At some point, you may wish to share this notebook with other people you may be collaborating with or something. So imagine you're a data scientist and there's somebody else who is supposed to work on the deployment of the application. They'll probably need access to your notebook. Yeah. Anyways, I don't know if there's any other thoughts about this. I think in terms of the basics, we need to know about notebooks that should be sufficient. If you know how to create textual content, if you know how to write Python code, and if you know how to I was going to say if you know how to plot, but obviously if you know how to write Python code, you should know how to plot, right? To be able to actually effectively use a typical Python notebook. All of this will probably make sense, and I do encourage you, if you go to colab.research.google, all right, and going forward, actually, in as much as it will be in your best interest for you to install Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebooks on your computer, but it turns out that just by using Google Colab, link has been shared, you should be able to accomplish the same things that we're discussing. All right. Again, the idea behind the Google Collaboratory Service is it's a cloud-based service that makes it possible for you to create and run notebooks. It's like instead of you installing a word processor like Microsoft Word, you can just use Google Docs. All right. So you go there by creating the by going to this link, and because it's a Google service, if you have a Gmail account, right, you should be able to easily gain access to this service without a problem. But you need to explicitly tell Google that you want to log in with your Gmail account or something. I'm going to give you time. Maybe I think it will make sense if we, before we proceed to the next part here, getting started with Python. I want to suggest that maybe you find time and just try and see if you can get to colab.research.google, right? At least one of the things we want to accomplish at the end of this session is everybody should be able to use Google Colab. So we'll give you maybe 2 minutes. So by 1910 we should have done this. So I'm not sure if people have managed to create Google Colab. It should be fairly straightforward here. So when you log in, or at least when you access the service, by default there's a pop-up window that's going to come up. If you've done this in the past, then you have access to recent notebooks. These are automatically associated with with your account. What I like doing myself is I'll normally create a notebook from within the from within Drive, right? So within Drive, you know how you can go to New and you create Google Docs, Google Slides, Google Forms. Well, something else you can do is you can create a Google Collaboratory notebook, right? You can create a notebook here. So one of the options here will be this. And the idea behind that is your notebooks are going to be properly organized within within your Google Drive folders if you use Google Drive like that. But also, what happens is if you create the notebook from right within the Colab interface, by default, in your Google Drive, one of the folders it's distinct, it's different. It's going to be Colab Notebooks. There's this thing that's going to be created called Colab Notebooks, and within there is where you're going to find all of the notebooks, right? Everything you've created for as long as you've been using Colab or something. In my case, you notice that I have files from as far back as 2020. But what I like doing myself, really, to be honest, is I prefer to organize because I create notebooks based on maybe a project that I'll be working on, or maybe a topic that I'll be teaching or something. But have we all managed to access Google Colab? Yeah, okay. I'm assuming we have here. What you want to do is you want to immediately click on the new notebook, and then you should be presented with this interface. Now, what you will notice is that this interface is similar to the Jupyter Notebook interface we're looking at. I mean, there's few minor differences, but the idea is the same, right? You have menu items that will allow you to open files, menu items that will allow you to run all the cells, to run the current cell. In Google Colab, obviously running the current cell involves you clicking on the play button that is right within the cell. You can move cells up and down, right, to different sections of the notebook, all sorts of things. The interesting feature which we'll discuss at a later stage is you can actually link to data, right? You can mount your drive because it's a different service, it's different from Google Drive. You can mount your drive so that you get access to maybe data that you'd be data that you'd have uploaded into your Google Drive, for instance. But anyways, so the idea behind Google Colab really is it's supposed to be a cloud-based service that allows you to work with Jupyter Notebooks or notebooks in essence. So you have your menu item, right? You also have a toolbar that allows you to create code cells and text cells. Remember, code cells will allow you to run Python code, and non-Python code, which obviously would have to be specified using so-called cell magics. So for instance, for bash scripts, you would use the exclamation mark before each bash command. And then the textual content will be specified using markdown. Okay. If you have a lot of money and you're writing, and you're running something that is computationally intensive, something that requires a lot of resources, there's an option where you can buy more information, buy additional computing power from Google. I believe there should be a way of doing this here. I think there's let's see here. You can go to, is it connect to a hosted runtime or something? I wanted to check the location where you can check for these resources. Let me see here. Your resources maybe. Yeah, so if you notice here, right? Right, and it's a big one here. If you notice here, they're saying I'm not subscribed to any paid for runtime, right? But I can purchase more units. Apparently, you can go here. Actually, I can purchase more units if I choose to still use this free tier. If we can call it a free tier, the drawback is, for instance, the runtime is only going to be valid for a limited amount of time. That may be good or bad. I think it's bad in some instances. There are times when I found myself running jobs, and these are simple things, right? Text processing, where things are taking days. Now, if something is taking days to run, and you have a limit of 85 hours, then whatever it is you're doing is going to be cut short. So if you don't want that to happen, you can look up this, right? Not exactly cheap here, but you have access to faster GPUs. Now, for most of the use cases we're going to be using in this course, really, there'll be no need for us to worry about this. You usually want to worry about this if you're working on a project that is computationally intensive, really. And I have examples of this later on when we start looking at evaluating the efficiency of models, right? I like using example of a colleague I used to work with. I was supervising, Robert Msendo. I remember when he was implementing certain models, right? He's attempting to train a model and he kept on running into certain errors here. Maybe I guess I can find these errors here so that you see what I mean here. I'll say to me. Hopefully I'll be able to find these errors. I believe I will. RAM. Maybe RAM will be a good. But anyway, maybe I won't find it. Maybe I will, but that's okay. Probably not. There's an interesting error. I like using it as an example here. He was running into different errors, and I remember at some point he had to go through Xamarin to gain access to additional computing power. Anyways, but that's okay. Again, similar to your Jupyter Lab or Jupyter Notebooks, the locally installed one, that is, you have a text panel which you use to specify your textual content and your code snippets. And then to the left is a panel that allows you to do a number of interesting things. Like, for instance, you can see the structure of your notebook. So if you look at the example of this real world notebook, I can gain a sense of the structure of this notebook. So I see that there's a title, and then there are sections like proposed solution. Makes it a lot easier for me to navigate to a section I want to go to. So if this is a very, which it is, if this is a very lengthy notebook, very detailed, and I'm only interested in modeling, I would use a table of contents to just navigate to that part of the notebook. I think I already showcased the fact that you can also mount you can mount your Google Drive from here, right? Because it turns out that when you're wanting to access or if you want to use external files, for instance, once this session ends, whatever files you'd have uploaded through Google Colab, unless if things have changed, will be deleted, right? And so you're better off uploading external files maybe via Drive or something and then mounting the drive. All right. I don't know if there are any thoughts about Google Colab. Maybe people can try out. Why don't we create this? Why don't we create a notebook that will have the following, right? It will have be marked down, right? So a notebook. So I'll say create a notebook with the following content. Heading 1 that says CSC 5741 first notebook, and then paragraph that just says this is my first UNZA Jupyter Notebook. And what I would want us to do is UNZA should link to UNZA website, and then code cell with the following Python code. Hello CSC 5741. Let's do that and just do it in Jupyter Notebooks and see if you'll be able to accomplish this. It will at least force you to use a notebook, and what I want to suggest is maybe we can have somebody who has a computer on here to who's using a computer to share their screen so that we can see what you're doing. Any volunteers? David, do you want to volunteer? You are using your computer, I know, right? You have a computer.
No, I'm using a phone, sir.
You're lying, David.
I'm serious.
No, that's okay. Lloyd, I think you're using your computer, right? Fire up Google Colab. Let's see. Share it.
No, Doc, I'm using my phone.
No, but even your phone can be used for that. Isn't there anybody who wants to volunteer? It's a simple exercise, right? Anyways, the idea is we were expecting you to. Yes, please, Emmanuel, share away, and let's just. It's like a short break here where we do something simple, trivial, but necessary, because once we get to the Python 101 here, the expectation is that everybody's going to be running or doing the things that we're going to be discussing to try and reinforce the theory, bearing in mind that, you see, we're not supposed to be teaching people how to program per se, which is why it's indeed a crash course introduction to Python, right? You can't possibly cover. You can share your screen, by the way, Mr. Emmanuel. I don't know if that was you are volunteering or you have the question, but Mr. Chungu. Okay. Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Yeah. Yes, so you have Jupyter Notebook. What I wanted to suggest is, can we go to Google Colab, right? Open Google Colab, if you can manage to do that. And let's do that from Google Colab. So what Emmanuel has done is, I think he already has um, Jupyter Lab. This is clearly Jupyter Lab installed on his computer, which is good. So it's good to go here. If you're able to go to collab.research.google.com, that would be good. And then we want to get to that interface so that everybody sees, at least the people that are not familiar. I know there's a number of you that probably already, especially those that have done some data mining course, I believe. So if you can share I see you're only sharing one window. If you can go to collab.research.google.com and then just share that screen, that would be good. Then we can do it from there. I think you still have your Jupyter Lab shared because you've only shared a window, so we can't see the other things that you're showcasing. Beautiful stuff. So I see somebody was actually accessing these things today. So I see there's an untitled notebook. So the idea is, if you're doing this for the first time, which Emmanuel was obviously not doing for the first time, he's done this before, or at least he was going through, as I was showcasing this, we can see, right? You click the blue button that says new notebook. You create a notebook, and the important thing is you want to make sure that you obviously name the notebook. I mean, naming it by default, if you notice, it's called untitled 1.ipynb. So you can just double click inside that untitled 1 IPYD and just change the name to whatever it is you want it to be, and then you can start the stuff, right? So we said that yes, we said that the very first thing we need to do is we create a text cell, all right, that is supposed to comprise of the heading CSC 5741, right? First notebook or something. Now what you'll notice by default is you can just type that thing, Bob. Actually, you can, if you look at the cell you've created below, that's a text cell. Where you are at right now is a code cell, and you know it's a code cell because, and you can see here it says start coding or generate with AI or something. So just double click in there. By the way, the one below. By the way, colleagues, I had no idea that Google Colab had evolved. There's now a generate with AI here. And then in there you can type the code that is going to render the heading 1 called CSC 5741. Wonderful. Yep. First notebook, or you can just leave it doesn't matter. But yeah. Right. So we can run, and what you notice with Colab, right? I don't know if you can see this, but you see to the right that if when you write something, there's a preview. So if you have to put two pounds before you run that cell, if you add an additional pound symbol at the very beginning of the line there, what you notice is the size is going to change, right? So it kind of showcases how the text is going to look at, which sometimes can be useful, I suppose. I don't know. But anyway, so you can create that, and then we're supposed to create some paragraph that says this is my first UNZA Jupyter notebook with a link to the UNZA website. So the thing about textual content is, unlike code where in some instances you'd want to run different portions of your code, warranting you to create separate cells, with the textual content, you can have everything encapsulated in one cell. So in the next line, you can just go to the next line, you hit the enter button at the end there, and in the next line you can create your paragraph, right, which says this is my first Unza Jupyter notebook or something, and again the text that you're writing is obviously going to be previewed. There's a preview that's going to be it's going to appear to the right. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah. I don't know if you remember how you can create a link to the Unza website, right? Because you know that I don't know if you can see there, Unza is not hyperlinked right now. I guess we didn't discuss this. I'm just looking at the Markdown guide here, but we didn't discuss this. I only said that you could use. Oh, there we go. You can embed HTML, but also if you look at the guide itself that I provided you, somewhere under the link section, there's a syntax on how you provide. Excuse me, on how you provide a link to text, right? So in square brackets, you write the label of the link, and then in parentheses. So instead of using Markdown, what you can do is you put Unza in square brackets, and then right after the closing square bracket, you put in parentheses, you put the URL. So put parentheses now. No, at the end, right there. No. So the label is in square brackets, like the way it was, and then you open parentheses. No, open, not closing. No. Right after the square brackets is the syntax. No. So you leave the Unza label the way it is, and then at the end of the square bracket, open the parentheses, and then the URL. Not the braces, but the parentheses. I guess you have one of those complicated keyboards, right? That is supposed to be a parenthesis. I don't know if you have it on my keyboard. It's after it's right at the same point as the number 9. There's not supposed to be no space. It's continuous. Right, and then so inside there, you notice that the hyperlink has actually already appeared, and so all you do now is you provide the URL inside the parentheses. And so you'd have created your hyperlink. It doesn't happen often that you do this, but in some instances it may become useful, especially if you're, let's say, wanting to provide people with a link to a source of data or something. So in there you can type HTTPS, the usual stuff, right? Or you can open Unza website and just copy the URL from the address bar and paste it right there. Yeah. It mustn't be in quotes, just the way it is. And then if you run it, control enter, just press control enter whilst you're in that cell, control and then the enter button at the same time once you're done writing that. Right, so I mean, that would be the first bit where you've created you'd have created that chunk of text. You can just press control enter to run that cell on your keyboard, control and then enter. Oh, you're using Mac. Okay, I see. I see. I see what you mean. Try and just hit the enter key. Let's see what. But the enter key won't. Command enter then. I don't know if it's command enter on Mac. It should be the same thing. I don't use Mac, but I've found myself in. I don't know how you. I don't know if it's a command key enter. There we go. So done, right? So if you click on that unza, it will take you to unza now. Now the last bit is where we're saying you could then write the Python code where you just write print hello CSC 741 in the code cell. Now what you'll notice is that the code cell is different from the text cell. Obviously looks different. And the other thing is just say print hello CSC 741 in there. And you need yes, and it should be quoted, the text string. Yeah. What you will notice is when he hits a command or when he executes it using the button, the play button, right before the cell, at the beginning of the cell itself, the output will appear right below the cell. That's not the case for the previous cell because that is it's a text cell. Then done, right? It would be nice if you were to familiarize yourselves with this because the next time we are discussing this, we'll actually be looking at. We'll start the discussion of Python really, and the assumption will be that you at least have either an IDE. I've always thought that if you're using Google Colab or if you install Jupyter Lab, you don't really need an IDE. I mean, sure, an IDE like PyCharm will probably have nifty features like code completion, right? But because you're not really going to be doing things that are very complex, you can use this as your Python IDE. So it's in your best interest if you were to familiarize yourself with this before we start our discussion of Python. Now, so thanks very much. We can unshare the screen and then I'll share my screen. Already at the 2-hour mark here, I want to suggest something. The next bit, I don't know if there are thoughts or questions about this, but the next bit is supposed to be, our introduction to Python. I want to suggest that we continue with the basics of Python when we meet on Wednesday. But for now, I guess we can we can look at the first 2 points here, just a brief introduction and maybe give you pointers on how you can set up your Python installation. Not that it's important here, you should know how to install here and maybe setting up the environment. But just to mention that in addition to Python, what I'm going to do is I'll be sharing this, and I think beginning part 3 here, this is when we're going to be doing a number of things as far as programming is concerned. What I'll be doing is I'll be sharing my notebooks. So I normally share them as IPython notebooks files, right, on the Google Classroom site, but also a direct link to the Google Colab notebook. It's read-only anyway, so you can replicate it if you want to do that, right? In addition, I may create a GitHub repository that will have all these different things. This will probably be useful because at some point we'll start referring to specific data sets that are going to be used in the examples, right? Just showcasing the structure of the GitHub repository when they're shared. So you will find the slides in the slides directory and then the code will be in the code directory. Now, you see, I don't know if you're one of those people who normally responds to there's a number of surveys that are normally conducted, right? I don't know if people respond to these surveys here, but if you look up Stack Overflow survey, we can look at last year's developer survey, for instance, the results. Hopefully the results are here. What you will notice is that there are a number of interesting statistics that are computed, and that's not the only survey that is conducted, right? But what I want to draw attention to here is details to do with how these data mining centric solutions are deployed. right? You notice that in as much as a lot of people tend to deploy these things on dedicated, could be dedicated desktops or laptops or server computer systems, but there's an increasing number of people that deploy these solutions in the cloud. And it turns out that life has become relatively easier now when it comes to cloud-based services. In fact, most of these cloud-based services like Google Compute Platform and Amazon Web Services will have free tiers that will make it possible for you to deploy your solutions there. And then as you are scaling up, if the resources are not enough, you can then pay a bit of money there, right? The other important thing here is that if you look at the screenshot on the right here, the second point here is looking at is it the language which is most popular for DS is data science, by the way. It's data science / machine learning or Internet of Things applications. You notice that Python is top on the list. And really what we're providing here is motivation for why we specifically chose Python as the language, right? This is beautiful. Last year's developer survey seems to have a bit of additional information. I'm going to share this with you, colleagues, in case you haven't looked at the results for last year's survey. And if you go to the AI section, I was expecting more. I was actually. So you notice this is new actually. In the last developer surveys, there was no dedicated. This is beautiful here. There's no dedicated section for AI, so this was a new section for 2023. We have a deep dive of the data, and yeah, this is good stuff. If you look at developer tools here, probably not very useful information. Let me just go back. I'm interested in. I was looking at. I thought I would find. This is what I'm looking for: AI tools in the development process. This is not very detailed, right? I was expecting these people would be looking at. I'm looking for a part that has at least an overview of AI in development. Not very useful at all. Yeah, not very useful at all. But I'm sure it's somewhere in here, I guess. I don't know. Has anyone found anything that speaks to the tools that people are using? Popular technologies, maybe. This thing has changed, right? This thing has changed. I was hoping I would find a section similar to what you're seeing right now, but one that speaks to AI tooling, really. But that's okay. Either way, I mean, even without talking about machine learning, what you notice here is that Python is one of those most widely used tools, right? And really, that's one of the motivating factors. It's easy to use. There's a lot of support. You can use it for, it's a general purpose language. There are people that would develop desktop-based applications. I mean, they're gradually becoming obsolete here, but you can develop desktop-based applications using, is it TK Kinta or something? Python TK Kinta. I've used this in the past. I know there are probably better libraries that you can use, but when it comes to web applications, you can use Django, frameworks like Django, right? They enable you to quickly develop web applications. So it's actually a general purpose language, really. I'm not sure about mobile development here using Python, but I guess that should be motivation enough to say if you learn how to program in Python, you're not just restricted to undertaking projects that are to do with data mining. You can do much more, right? There's quite a bit of support. And really, if you haven't worked with a language like Python before, if you're coming from a background of Java, and is it C++ or something, the one thing that you discover about Python is that it's not very verbose. Unlike Java, right, where I don't know if you remember this, but if you are to create, if you want to create just in Java, right, if you just want to create a program that will print hello CSC5741, public class CSC51, right, CSC751, the usual stuff, public static void main, right, string, right, I don't know if people remember this, right? And then you do the usual stuff here, and then you have your system.out.println or something like that, right, with your semicolon. So this would be a Java, right? And I guess we can probably do that here. Nobody cares. CSC5741.java, right? And then you do the usual thing, javac CSC5741. It's javac with one C, CSC5741, and then you have your Java not Java now, but your Java now I don't know why I didn't print in here, say CSC 5741 or something, right? So you compile this Java, and then you have your Java, and then it prints that. Oh, with Python, gentlemen, all you do is you create your CSC 5741.py file like that, and then in here you just say print CSC 5741, right? Done, one liner, right? And then I'll just say Python 3 CSC 5741, done. You know, so it's non-verbose, right? And I want to draw attention to there's an Easter egg. If you just within your interpreter or within your Jupyter Lab or your Google Colab, if you just say import this, right, you have what's called the Zen of Python, highlighting the key characteristics of Python, right? You know, beautiful is better than ugly, explicit is better than implicit, and all of these statements speak to the Python programming language. I do hope you have as much fun using Python if you're learning Python for the first time as I did when I was first learning how to program in Python back in, I believe that was, must have been 2011 it was. I must admit I regret learning about Python later in life, right? In fact, I wish my introduction to programming course was done using a simple language like Python, because I had trouble learning how to program using Java, if you will. A lot of memorizing, right? Or there has to be a brace here or something, even when you didn't understand what that was all about. But that's fine, you know. So the Zen of Python. Sorry about that. There was I'm tethering my phone because I'm having a challenge with my thing here. But just somebody was trying to call me. I'll just say, "I'll call back." All right. But something that perhaps will be a bit confusing at the very beginning, especially if you're coming from a background of Java, is, you know, the fact that the syntax is a bit strange here, right? So things like indentation are extremely important. I don't know if you noticed this, but when I was creating the function to add, where I did a df, create a function to add two numbers, right? Variable 1 and variable 2. For starters, the syntax dictates it because, unlike languages like Java where you have parentheses and whatnot, indentation is important. So a function definition is obviously, the method signature here starts with definition, def, short for definition, the function name, and then the the parameters here and then a full colon, right? You enter. If I just say print var1 plus var2, I'll get an error, right? Because indentation is important. So this will only work if I indent the code. And we'll discuss indentation soon enough, actually. So if I say 5,2 here, I'll get 7 or something. We'll discuss indentation. So there's things like indentation that would be a bit strange. What else would be strange for you? Maybe other other aspects of Python to do with the syntax, like when to use full colons and all that, because that's how you define structure, right? The fact that there's no way of terminating statements, if you will. So in Java you have a semicolon or something. No such thing in Python. But also, this may be a bit strange, but you grow to probably appreciate this, right? The fact that you can achieve so much more in a single line of code. But anyways, so quite an interesting language. But what's important is to remember that this is an interpreted language. Remember, compiled this as interpreted language. What that means, if you remember your programming 101, is that once you write your program, you must make sure that wherever it's executed, there must be an interpreter, which is why the very first thing you need to do is install Python. So if I send to you this csv741.py file, for you to be able to run this, you need to have a Python interpreter installed. Okay? If you're shipping this program somebody else, they must have an interpreter installed. You won't have to worry about this because most Python these days, most applications will either be web applications, so they're deployed on a server or something, and so you'll be accessing this Python-based application or program via some web service, and the users won't really have to worry about, I don't have Python installed, right? It's considered a scripting language. It's quite popular with people that would want to run or to write very simple programs, if you will, that perform repetitive tasks, right? Ad hoc tasks. It's quite popular with administrators. It's like Bash or like Perl, right? Like that. I already made mention of the fact that it's general purpose, so it's known to be used for a wide variety of tasks. You can create web applications using Python. You can write desktop-based applications using Python, right? You can use it as a scripting language, but also it's object-oriented as well. In the course, I don't know if I mentioned this already, but I use a specific version. If you want to follow through with what I'm doing, you want to make sure that you install version 3.11.6 of the interpreter, just in case. But usually, if you are running on version 3, I think you should be able to run most of the things that are going to be in the source code I'll be sharing anyway. But to be on the safe side, if you want to replicate the things I'll be showcasing, you best ensure that you have 3.11.6 installed. Yeah, and then the other thing here is that you can execute code direct from the interpreter, right? That's a beauty. Unlike Java, all I do is if I want to test out things, I don't know if you've noticed, I can interact with the interpreter interactively, right? So I will fire up the interpreter. In my case, on my machine, I'll just say Python 3. In some instances, you can do this within the IDE, depending on the IDE we are using, maybe PyCharm or something. So within here, I can run statements, right? Print hello CSC741, right? And once I'm happy with this, it's like a quick and dirty way of testing code. Once I'm done doing this, I can then create my script file, right? The actual file which is going to have, it's a module file, it's called. The file itself that will have the code, right? So this could be a very large module file that has a series of functions that interact with each other, classes, right? Where objects are created and so there's a bit of back and forth in terms of interaction between the objects in the different classes or associated with the different classes. But the beauty is you can interact with the interpreter like this. And then obviously you can, not obvious, but you can also execute Python scripts, right, as shell commands. So if you've worked as a system administrator, you agree with me that when you create a file like this, once once the file mode has been changed to executable, we can actually run it with a dot forward slash with the name of the file, and then you should be able to run this thing. But of course, the shebang needs to be changed here, is it? If you know this, right? Is it like this or like this? Let me just say, sorry about that. Come on. I'll just say, where is Python? The thing is, the shebang needs to be is here. Right. So if I include this and I just do a dot this, it's going to run that file, right? It's run it as a script, and this is quite useful, really. If you're running this thing as a, well, I mean, if it's a script file that is supposed to perform some basic or some ad hoc admin centric, system administration centric task, it becomes a lot easier for you to just create a simple file, and then you make sure that the file mode is at least the file is executable, and then you can execute it without explicitly referring to the interpreter. In this case, I would have to type Python 3 space the file name, right? So I accomplish the same thing because this is executable now, like that, right? All right, and then in terms of installation and setup, colleagues, I would like to encourage you to go to, at your own time, python.org, and then somewhere there, or just Google up Python, you go to python.org, somewhere there should be a menu item that takes you to downloads. When you go to downloads, just make sure that you install the appropriate version of Python. Appropriate in the sense that it should be tied to, you might as well install the latest version anyway. You want it to be tied to your specific operating system, so there's options for you to download one for Windows, Linux, or Unix, Mac OS, like our colleague Mr. Emmanuel here, who has a lot of money, I suppose. Or maybe the employers have purchased a machine for him, but that's okay. It's a compliment, by the way. So you go there and you install your interpreter, right? Once you install your interpreter, you can already start interacting with as soon as you install Python, you can already start interacting with the interpreter, like I was showcasing here, or creating a module file. But like all programming languages, when you're getting started, to avoid common errors, you're better off identifying an appropriate integrated development environment, an IDE. Now, there are a lot of them. My advice is go to curated lists like this. I like referring to this Stack Overflow thread here, which has a very nice list of IDEs, right? It's probably one of those popular threads here. Or you can just, so I'm just going to go here, see if it's still active. I think it is still active. All right, it's from it was even closed 7 years ago, right? So if you look at the very first answer, the most popular answer here, you notice that they created a very nice spreadsheet. There's actually a link to the original spreadsheet here with a list of all IDEs. Now, the number of IDEs gives you an idea of how popular this thing is, right? All IDEs with an indication of whether the IDE, colleagues, is commercial, whether it's cross-platform. You can use it on, different operating systems, right? And a bunch of other aspects, right? Things that would probably be useful in helping you decide on which IDE you want to use. I use Vim myself, which is here. I don't know if you can see. I use a Vim text editor. But what I would want to advise you to do is to consider looking at things like, these are things I've used in the past. Consider downloading Wing, right? So if you go to wingware.com, it's a very it has a very easy to use interface, right? I'm sure you enjoy it as much as I did here. This is interesting. It's supposed to be, so you want to go for Wing 101, by the way, not Wing Pro. So there's a free version, Wing 101. Quite useful. I mean, quite easy to use. A very familiar interface, I imagine. But also, if you're a sort of person who is you're very proficient in programming, and so you're not interested in things like code completion and all these weird things, what you can do is you can go for a text editor like Kate. I like using Kate myself because with Kate, I can do much more, right? So with Kate, if you notice, if I go under settings and I go under, is it settings or tools? I think it is. If I go under tools and then I go under, I believe it's highlighting, right? So if I go under highlighting or mode or something, what you'll notice is that in here, actually I should have said other languages or something. You notice that one of the reasons I use Kate is because I can use it for other things. Like we're just discussing Markdown. Guess what? Under Markdown there's ASN.1. I used this when I was working in the telecom sector here because files were generated using the ASN.1 syntax. Crazy times, those ones. What else is there? HTML, right? JSON, LaTeX, Markdown. You know, so I can. One of the reasons why I like using Kate myself is because I can use it for a whole bunch of other things. Anyway, I don't know if you'd be interested in that, but again, it's up to you. I do encourage you to find time and try and evaluate, you know, which tool is best for you. If you're a developer, or if you've used so-called Visual Studio Code in the past, there's a Python extension. So you can actually write Python code within Visual Studio Code. Again, that would be my recommendation anyway, because I've used that in the past and really it's easy to use. So the beauty is, by the way, if you decide to use Visual Studio Code, you can also you can run your Python notebooks. Remember the IPYNB files we are creating with Jupyter Lab, where once you create them, you can actually open them in or edit them using Visual Studio Code if you install the appropriate extension. Okay, I want to pause here and just find out if people have any thoughts. I think that was enough to unpack for today. We will continue our discussion on Wednesday, where we start looking at just the basics of Python. And just to mention that the Wednesday class is going to be in person. I'm not sure if, because it's a bit of a hands-on thing, if you think the hands-on thing is going to be a bit better, if it's better as well. I mean, if it's online or if it's virtual, I will ask that you discuss as a group and you have the course rep let me know. But otherwise, the assumption will be to be in person. Are there any thoughts or questions about what we've discussed today? Or questions that concerns that you might have perhaps? All right, wonderful stuff. All right. Anyways, if there are no thoughts or questions, thank you very much, everybody. And we shall see you on Wednesday. If I were you, by the time we're having class, before we have class on Wednesday, I would install all these tools we've discussed. Otherwise, you risk finding yourself in a situation where you fall behind, right? Thank you very much and good night.
Thank you, Doc.